Give it a second to connect to mute or Instagram. And we are live. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual co-hosts and do not reflect the official policy or position of the Firearms Radio Network and or their employers. Why are you doing that? You would act like it's episode 1 and not 92. All right, let's get this thing a go. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual co-hosts and do not reflect the official policy or position of the Firearms Radio Network and or their employers. Viewer discretion is advised. This is especially true on live shows. If you like what we're doing and would like to help support the show, visit patreon.com/afteractionproject. If you'd like to throw us some free support and appreciation, we would greatly appreciate a 5-star review on iTunes. And then tonight's episode, just like every episode, is brought to you by the Firearms Radio Network. Be sure to check out the other great podcasts on the Firearms Radio Network by visiting firearms-related.net. Our other show sponsor is the RangeBuddy.App. If you guys haven't checked that out, be sure to open up your phone's app store and just search for the RangeBuddy.App. We just added the 52-week challenge that's gained a ton of traction on Facebook and Instagram and all that good stuff. And what it is, you're shooting a version of Tom Gibbons' card drill. This started off kind of as a challenge from the gun set training group, but it's 5 rounds into a modern playing card from 5 yards in under 5 seconds. And you do that every week for a year. That'll burn through the 52 cards that are in a deck. Although I guess there are 54 if you count the jokers, and I think some folks are using that. We're doing a giveaway kind of along with that, probably about Valentine's Day, somewhere therein, give or take a day or two. To enter that, all you have to do is shoot the drill, log it in the RangeBuddy training session tracker. That'll put you on the leaderboard, and then share a screenshot of your position on the leaderboard and a picture of your card within the Deliberate Training Group V.2. That'll get you entered to win. I'm going to choose a random person off of the leaderboard for that. You're going to get 500 rounds of 9mm ammo provided by First Round Ammunition. And that's a huge shout out and thanks to Nick Newberry for that. But enough with that stuff. Let's get into tonight's episode. Episode 92. We are joined by Tim Kelly and Dan Brady of Apache Solutions, and we'll be discussing their Instructor Enrichment Program. Give myself a big pat on the back for making it through that intro without messing up anybody's names. We have Candy and Adam. They're students in that Instructor Enrichment Program, so they'll be giving us the students' perspective on that. And then, as always, before we do that, I like to do the lazy podcast hosts deal, and I'm going to ask you each to introduce yourself. So, Tim, why don't you step on up to the plate, reintroduce yourself to our listeners, what got you into the firearms training deal, and then I guess before we get to the other guests, talk to us a little bit about the birthplace of the Instructor Enrichment Program.
Okay, great. So my name is Tim Kelly. I'm the owner of Apache Solutions. I started this business back in 2017 to create a stronger and more competent armed society. Before that, I spent about 8 years in the Marine Corps Infantry. Wanted to do that ever since I was a little rugrat. Got to live my dream. Then got out, ended up in college, earned my degree in mechanical engineering, learning how to design and manufacture firearms and firearms components. I did that for a short period of time. And I'll just say it wasn't for me. So I got out of that and wandered around aimlessly for a little while until I discovered a pretty significant need for firearms training in my community. And everywhere I seemed to look, there really wasn't anything around that existed in the format that I wanted or that I had imagined it needed to be like. So we structured Apache a lot like a gym with a private trainer. So we have a really unique way of handling training where most folks come to us and they sign up for a 1 hour block of instruction or a 2 hour block of instruction. And we get students back to back Monday through Sunday. Like it's 7 days a week. So we constantly have a trainer on the range out there working with students individually, meeting them where they are, helping them establish goals and helping them meet those goals along the way. So folks come back weekly, they come back bi-weekly, so on and so forth, whatever works best for them. So again, a lot like a gym with a private trainer. Also on the weekends, we teach classes. We teach, everything from your standard concealed carry class and basic pistol courses and that type of thing, all the way up to more advanced curriculum, much like our newly developed Instructor Enrichment Program. The Instructor Enrichment Program was developed to address a lot of the shortcomings of instructor development courses, and in hopes to try and change the way we evaluate ourselves as trainers and to hold ourselves to a higher standard. So that was created right here inside the office, where one day myself and Dan and Frank and we'll just say the Raven was here, and we all came together and started talking about discussing different ideas and different things that we thought that was missing out in your typical instructor development course. And we immediately started game planning. How do we change this? How do we incorporate some of this stuff? And it took us a year and a half, I'd say.
18 months.
Yeah. About 18 months or so of really chipping away and trying to make this work. And it's really proud of it. It's been one of our greatest accomplishments as far as course development goes.
That's awesome. And I've seen some of the names of the instructors that have gone through that program, like Candy and Adam. So it looks like that the first cadre of students, the first group of students coming out of that are some well-known and well-respected instructors within the industry. Dan, let's kick it over to you. Reintroduce yourself to our guests, our listeners.
My name is Dan Brady. I work for Tim part-time as an instructor with Apache Solutions. I'm still a full-time law enforcement officer. I work for the Department of Defense full-time, and my primary job is as a trainer of police officers. I got into training 20 odd years ago when I graduated my first police academy, and I realized that what was taught in terms of firearms skills was so bargain basement level. And as I advanced my own skill sets and trained across the law enforcement community, I didn't see it being substantially better anywhere that I really trained. There were some places that were significantly better, and I would grab something from there and I would grab something from over there and bring it back into my own program. But the development of it was so slow, very, very ponderous to get any kind of change. And when I realized that there was a civilian-led defensive firearms instructional community, I subjected myself to a lot of that, and I realized that there was indeed a better way, and I have just stayed with that for quite some time. Like Tim, I spent some time in the Marine Corps Infantry. He and I actually served in the exact same unit, just about 10 years apart, since I'm substantially older than he is. And we met at an instructor course, realized we lived just a few hours apart, and when I saw what he had or was developing at Apache Solutions, I was like, sign me up, man. I believe in this 100%. And that was 4 something years ago, Tim. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
So, yeah, that's my sort of elevator introduction, if you will.
That's neat, man. I met the instructor level course that I went through, if we could call it an instructor level course, the very first one, right? Like the NRA, there were a couple guys in there, and I'm like, oh, they might be, good folks to work together with. And let me just tell you, they weren't. I think a couple of them are running their own show, their own shop right now. But I remember co-teaching a class with a guy, and we each kind of brought some students together. And I was thinking, holy cow, I do not want this guy's name on my reputation. So it's cool that you guys were able to link up and neither one of you were jerks or I guess bad people, bad instructors. So let's go to ladies third. Sorry, I cut you off there, Dan.
Yep.
No, let's go to ladies third. Candy, introduce yourself to our listeners. Talk to us a little bit about your background in the firearms training industry and what brought you to the Instructor Enrichment Program.
Okay, well, my name is Candy Petticord, and I am a facilitator for 3 chapters of A Girl and a Gun. I am an NRA training counselor, and I am a USCCA instructor. I've got a whole slew of certifications, which I'm pretty proud of. But what brought me to the Instructor Enrichment Program is because, like Dan had mentioned before, I noticed that there is a lack. When I went through Apache's program, I noticed that one of the things that first jumped out at me was all the things that were taken for granted before weren't taken for granted anymore. In this program, things were spelled out, things were outlined, and I didn't realize until that point that a lot of stuff had been taken for granted. Something as simple as your range safety brief. I mean, they take the time to explain to you what a brief is, what it needs to be, why you must have it, how essential it is. And it was interesting because these are things that you take for granted, but you shouldn't. This program gave me a lot of whys behind the what, and as a woman, we thrive off the whys. If you can tell us why you want us to do something or why something is required, that makes it stick. That makes it real. That makes it potent and important and something that we want to pass along. So throughout this training, it was just mind blowing to me. It really was because, as I said, I've got a slew of certifications in my hot little pocket, but I have never gone through a course as amazing and educational as this one. It blew my socks off. It was amazing.
That's awesome to hear. And it's funny that you mentioned that the range safety brief, because looking back on it now, they don't teach you that in the NRA instructor course, and I'm not sure if they do it in the USC. They don't. There's nothing about how to run a safe and efficient range, and that is
Correct.
one of the most important things that an instructor can do. And you look at these folks and the students that you're going to be teaching, they're the never have I ever picked up a gun and shot it before. So how do you manage this herd of cats that have or could have a gun on them? And kind of looking back on it, I learned some. I was very fortunate in that I guess I had the common sense to kind of figure it out without having to put anybody's lives or safety on the line. But it's a very critical part of the teaching deal. And you don't learn it anywhere. You kind of have to figure it out on the fly. So Adam, welcome back. Glad to have you back on the show of Defenders USA. Go ahead and for people that we might have joining us that weren't on your episode with us, go ahead and introduce yourself to our listeners.
Well, thank you. Glad to be here. Name's Adam Winch. I run a company called Defenders USA. I come at this kind of differently than some. I just ran as a soldier and a cop for a long time. Did training both in the cop world and the military world for a long time. And then later, I started up a defensive training company. I didn't have a single civilian certification. Did a lot of cop stuff and SWAT things and whatever else. Then I just started trying to train civilians because I was tired of responding to calls for service with people that could have defended themselves had they known better how to. So ultimately, I just started teaching, and it grew a name. I didn't mean for it to. I was really just trying to get pizza money out of it and do it for fun, right? And it grew a name, and ultimately came down to where I could either start running full time, which I always wanted to run a business in America. I didn't grow up in this country, so I always wanted to see what it was like to run a business in America. And I could do that or continue being a cop. Well, decade plus of that, I was kind of ready to put the badge down and go try something else. And I thought, I'll just give it a try. And if it doesn't work, I'll go back to cop work. And it's succeeded. And so that's kind of where it started. I ran my first probably year and a half or 2 years without a single civilian certification, because I already knew, having met a bunch of NRA instructors, or at least the lower level NRA instructors, I didn't want anything to do with that. And at the time, that seemed like that was one of the only main ones out there, besides all the law enforcement certifications I had. So ultimately, I finally went to one, and dismally disappointed in what I saw, as you're talking about. And it was later, after that, when I realized, okay, I need to get some civilian certifications, and I need to start learning from, Joe Jane civilian. And I went into my first kind of instructor course, or really shooting course, taught by civilians, thinking I was all that in a bucket of neck bones. And within 10 minutes, because I picked out purposefully what I'd call one of the higher name instructors in the U.S., I went to that thinking I was going to be the best guy there, because I usually was in my department. Within 10 minutes, I was so humbled, I was embarrassed. I had no idea that as a cop, SWAT guy, everything else, I didn't know how to shoot. I thought I did. And from there, it woke me up to realize there's so much more out there I need to learn. And from there, I started just hitting not only every shooting course I could with really good name instructors, but started going to more and more instructor level courses, because I have a massive responsibility in a life or death situation to teach others to defend their life. So I want to do that in the best way I possibly can. And what better way to do that than to go to industry experts to learn? And that's kind of where it snowballed from. Ultimately, I've been teaching at a national conference the last couple, 4 or 5 years or so, the AGAG conference, A Girl in the Gun, where Candy comes from. That's where we met before.
Mhm.
But through AGAG, ultimately Dan and Tim and some of their crew were there the last 2 years I was there, and I got to meet them. They seemed interesting, right? Cool people. I like Dan. And kind of got to know Tim, but he was kind of further off. It seemed like I always ran into Dan and very few of the others, or Derek. And I started watching those guys, and started developing respect for them. And then, I don't know, sometime 5-6 months ago, I'm driving to Montana to teach a 10-day course. And I suddenly get a phone call from Tim, and he's like, "Hey, we're putting together a course. You want to come?" And I'm, absolutely. Drop the phone. Send me. Let's go. And just based on the respect, I had no idea what it was going to be. He just said, "We got a course." Sure, no problem. I'd love to go. And I'm really grateful I did.
That's awesome. I want to get caught up, man. You guys have a ton of viewers tuned in tonight. We got TC shouting out Dan's beard, so that's awesome. And then we have Jonathan Willis. Sorry, Jonathan, I'm the worst. Anyone seeing this, stay tuned. This course is like no other, a mandatory run for an instructor. So I want to dig into that a little bit. Tim, in your introduction, you talked about you guys were together, and you had noticed that there were some shortcomings and some missing items from instructor development courses. And I don't even think we should call them instructor development courses, right? There's I think within the last, aside from, Tom Gibbons and maybe one or two other folks, the instructor development courses were just instructor courses, right? Like here's a certificate to go teach an NRA course, and we'll send you the PowerPoint. But what were some of those shortcomings that you guys had specifically wanted to address?
Well, I guess first I want to point out that the enrichment program and the enrichment program is much different than your typical development programs. I'm not trying to take away from these development programs. I think they're absolutely necessary. I mean, much like Adam said, I didn't have any civilian level training or anything like that. I just went out and took an NRA basic pistol instructor course because that's what my state required in order for me to teach concealed carry classes. And, even though it was me and one other guy in the class, and it was probably not the best organized, I was able to take away a lot of really foundational information that helped me along the way. So I do believe that those courses have their purpose, and I wouldn't try and take that away from anybody. With that being said, they're not addressing stuff like the range safety brief. They're not, in a lot of these courses, they don't even have one themselves. They don't even have a plan at all, let alone try to teach you how to create one and teach you why it's so important. Another one, I guess it's just something that I've heard time and time again from mentors and from other seasoned instructors, is they expect you to know how to do certain things. Like, you're expected to already know how to run a line. Well, I have asked so many different people this question, and there's only one person, he's actually in the chat right now, but there's only one person that's ever been able to tell me that they were taught how to run a line. Otherwise, it's not in any instructor development course out there that's offered. And I'd argue that the attempts that are made in some of these development courses are just subpar, to say the least. And when you do have these opportunities in some of these courses, or these coaching opportunities especially, that's another thing, a whole nother topic. It takes away a lot of time for other stuff. Like it's just not run efficiently. And I think that's where the enrichment program really stands out, is the amount of training hours, the amount of coaching hours that you get, the opportunity to present, to teach in a course as call it a student, we call it a training partner, but the amount of time that they get individually to work on themselves as an instructor is really high. I mean, they get a lot of opportunity, and they still shoot 850 rounds at them. It's like, I mean, that's over a course of 3 days. They still were able to, get a lot of trigger time along with a lot of teaching time. So I think that's the biggest shortcoming, I would say, is that a lot of these programs are just inefficient.
I want to, for this next question, I want to go around the table and get everybody's opinion on it. I want to start with Dan, and kind of from your instructor's perspective and somebody who's helped put this course together. What would you say the biggest difference in who the student for this course should be? Tim was talking about it's an enrichment program, and that kind of gave me a little light bulb moment. And I said, okay, is it for the, hey, I just got my NRA certs, or should it be somebody who's maybe taking a range master course or taking like a level 2 instructor course? So who's this course kind of geared for? What instructor is it for?
If your intent is to educate other people around firearms, you can probably take this course. Our measure for success is, can you successfully complete the test, the 10-10-10 drill? Can you successfully do that? Can you draw and shoot somewhat effectively from a concealed holster? That's the shooting portion that we have the expectation of you to be able to do. Not a super high bar from a technical shooting position, but the focus really is on not what to teach, but more how to teach. And my experience echoed a lot by Adam's, and what Candy kind of touched on is how to present material to adult learners is not touched on anywhere in any course I had previously been to. I got a lot of that education directly. TC Fuller is in the chat there. TC's been a mentor of mine for a couple of decades now and has a doctorate in adult learning theory. Being, associated with him, I got to ask him a ton of questions as he wrote his master's thesis and as he wrote his PhD dissertation. I got to be present for all of that and sort of learned a lot of it by osmosis, basically. And consistently getting reading material from him. Hey, what should I be reading? Why is reading this important? And just these ongoing discussions. And I realized that when Tim brought up this idea of us creating a program to enrich already existing instructors across a wide range of individual technical abilities, that kind of ding, ding, ding went off in my head as something that I could really focus on. And Tim kind of gave me the ominous dominus and said, yes, go forth and do good things and create some good material for this. And, then show me what you got and we'll see how we put this together. So if you can pass a 10-10-10 drill, if you can draw from a holster and from a concealed holster and shoot, you have the technical ability to come to the course. It is more about giving you the tools and the resources to pursue how to teach adult learners.
That makes sense. TC in the chat or in the comment said, how many instructor courses out there actually teach one to instruct how to go about imparting information in this critically important area that students can recall and draw upon in a critical manner? Apache's course will help instructors understand where they are and help refine their ability to instruct. So kind of in that same line of questioning, Adam, what are your thoughts on, if you're as a student in this course, who are some of the other students that you think should be instructors, I guess, that should be kind of students share the student role with you in this?
So to make sure I understand the question, you're saying, say that again for me.
Who's clarify. In your opinion, who's this instructor course for? Like what?
Okay.
Where should they be at skills wise or teaching ability wise?
So to me, if this is your very first instructor course, I think it's going to be a bit of a struggle for you. I think the very first time instructor can come to it, but you're probably better off if you've taught a little bit here or there, or at least assisted instructed somewhere for a bit and maybe sat through one of the better instructor courses there before. It'd probably be helpful for it, because in this course, if you come into this, you're completely, totally green to this. It would be I think, a deluge of information. Had this been my very first instructor course, it would have been a lot, right? I was grateful that it wasn't my very first instructor course. And so I did have to feel like I was always trying to catch up. Now, that may be completely different what Tim and you and Dan want. Maybe you want the first time instructors, but it just seemed like if you're going to come in as a first time, this is your first instructor course, come in with some lifetime maturity, right? If you're the 18, 19, 20-year-old, 21-year-old, still with not a lot of life experience, this would probably be a bad idea. Now, if this is your first time instructor course, you're coming in with some life experience and some serious maturity about you, I think this would be an okay thing to come to. But on average, helpful if you've taught a little bit, or at least assisted instructed with good instructors before, so you can see how things are done well and you already have some general idea for it. So to me, I see this as the up and coming instructor who is done a little bit of this or a lot of this and just wants to go hone or refine the craft. One of the things I really liked within this is the constant or really continuous throughout this of student feedback to the fellow students, right? We weren't just sitting there listening to Tim or Dan just rah, rah, rah on what we needed to fix. They did that and they did it well, but it also allowed us to be able to say, hey, here's things I saw could be made better, different. By the way, this was really good. And I'm going to steal that from you because what you did was really good. I've never seen or heard that before. So we as students were able to actually learn from each other and also coach each other in this. And that was a bit unique. I've only seen that, I think, in one other course. and it was a bit unique. And all the instructor courses I've been to, you just don't see that very often. And the depth of the folks that was there, it felt like, I got some pretty important nuggets out of it, and tried to give a few, but I thought that was a really important thing to have. And I thought that was done well here. So because you're going to have not just instructor critique of what you do by the staff, but you're also going to have fellow students critiquing you on this and giving you pointers. I think if you already have a basis and foundation of already teaching to some degree before, it would be helpful ahead of time.
Love it. Candy, I'm going to switch it up with you. You mentioned in your intro that, and feel free to answer that previous question. I know you might have had some thoughts on that you want to add, but I want to specifically kind of dial into something that you mentioned in the pre-show, or not the pre-show, but in the introduction. And that's about how you've taken several other courses and you've gotten some certificates where a lot of folks, I would imagine, they might think that they don't need to take another instructor development course. So as a student who has really worked on their personal instructor development, how do you think this course allowed you to level up your instructor for your students, or your instruction for students?
At the risk of repeating myself, I enjoyed the fact that I was given the whys, because so many things that we do with firearms are done because that's the way it's always been done. That's just the way it's done. That's, and it just, and you don't even feel comfortable enough to ask, well, why is it done that way? We never had that at this course. As a matter of fact, we were encouraged all throughout the course to ask the whys, ask the questions. If something was presented that we didn't understand, or we didn't understand why it was done a certain way, and every single person on the Apache staff was there to answer those questions and to guide us along and to help us understand this is why we do what we do. And I remember, and Tim brought it up earlier, one of the things I totally admired so much was that when Tim started, he started out by saying, I am not cutting down or dismissing any other programs that are out there. That's not my intent. That's not my goal, because you can learn something from almost anyone. You really can. And he just made it crystal clear that he wanted to give us an even broader foundation from which to draw knowledge and reasons and facts for what we do. The manual that we were given, it's worth its weight in gold. It's priceless, simply because, again, as a woman, for me, it answers so many of the whys. It was just, I keep saying it was phenomenal because it was phenomenal. I wish I was going again tomorrow. Honestly, it was that awesome.
That's awesome to hear. Dan and Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, this was the first iteration of the course that you guys have ran?
So it was technically the second. So we did an in-house test. Our cadre is rather large. We've got about 16 people. And so we dropped in 12 of the 12 members of the cadre and ran a version of it, and got some of the meat and potatoes through it, but it didn't include some really necessary content that we had envisioned on, and including when we release it to the public. Mainly because we just didn't have the time. It was hard for me to gather, 12 dudes together that, all have day jobs and that sort of thing. It's hard for us to all get together at one time. And so we were just trying to throw the meat and potatoes at them and give them that. And so Dan's portion of the class, the self-evaluation competency, it was not delivered in its its intended format. So it was kind of sporadic before the course actually started and then after. So this one was actually what we referred to as the beta test, because it was the first time that anybody outside of our cadre had been introduced to our new program. So in a way, it's definitely the first class that's ever seen it in its entirety.
If you don't mind sharing it, and if there was there any feedback from the students in this course that kind of led you guys to come together afterwards and said, hey, maybe we incorporate this or maybe we tweak that? And kind of how do you see this course evolving after the first iteration?
Oh, man. Oh, there was a lot of great stuff, man. Like, honestly, you say feedback. There was stuff throughout the weekend that we learned that was like, oh man, this works really, really well. Or, oh man, that's a good point. There was a lot of really good takeaways during the class that is going to help us make the course even better for the next one. I sat down and I got an opportunity to speak with several of the folks over the phone. We actually sent out a survey for them to do a written, typed up. We generated some questions and stuff like that. A lot of really, really helpful feedback to help make this class even better. We changed a lot, but we really didn't. We didn't change the delivery or any of those things. Like there's a lot of really, really cool takeaways from folks like Adam, and Shannon Pable, Chris Bean. A lot of those folks contributed and saying, hey, I think you need to consider this. And it's really helpful.
Dan, I want to kick this over to you. What was the hardest part about launching this new curriculum and this new program?
For me personally, it was what Tim just stated is my portion of it was what I developed is what I refer to as self-evaluation competency. And if I can say that anything that I have ever cobbled together largely from my own head, it was this. Adam was particularly effusive in what he said to me near the end of the course, and he basically was like, I'm gonna steal that. And if, from a guy like Adam, to me, it's basically the best compliment I could ever get. But to be completely frank, putting this thing that I have created in front of this particular group of people that we invited to this was a little stressful for me. That was the instructors from around the country that we invited to this class. Some of them have some significant clout, and if I had really bombed that, Tim would have fired me, and I didn't want to get fired, but I really thought that it had some value. It would take a significant amount of time to go into exactly what self-evaluation competency is, but what I will say is the idea behind it is that I haven't thought that a lot of the testing that occurs, both academic and shooting wise, within instructor development programs or instructor certification programs, I don't think the testing that occurs in a lot of them is I'm not going to say it's not valid, but it's not as helpful to the student to really identify where they are. I'll say academically, 99% of the time, when you take a test, it's a multiple choice, true or false type test, which means the answer is there in front of you. You don't actually have to know the material. If you know how to take a multiple choice test, you can have absolutely zero idea what that test is, and you have a decent chance of getting a passing grade on it. I could take a multiple choice test from a lot of instructor development programs, put it in front of my brother, who knows next to zero about firearms instruction, and he could probably pass it because he knows how to test. I don't think that is as valuable to the student taking the test as having to actually know and have a command of the material to write down the answer, whatever the answer happens to be. And if you don't know it, if you leave it blank, if you have a wrong answer, it's not a value judgment on you as a person. It's just a reflection of where your knowledge bank happens to be at this moment in time. And maybe it gives you some food for thought and says, I don't know anything about pistol ballistics. Maybe I should look into that a little bit. And it gives you an avenue for self-growth. So that was sort of the overall idea on what I wanted to do with this, both from an academic portion and from a shooting evaluation portion. And I think the shooting evaluation portion that I came up with was really good. I'm real proud of it. And that was one of the things that Adam was like, nah, I'm stealing that. So, and Adam, your idea works perfectly.
Is there so I know some instructors don't like to give out the, hey, this is what the test is going to be. Are you able to share a little bit more about what that skills test is?
Nope.
Damn it, man. So I can't game it? You're telling me I can't practice the drills, for 6 months before I take the class and win a fancy badge?
Hey, I will say this. It's a bit realistic. Just leave it at that.
Awesome. Chris asked a great question. He said, question for Tim and Dan. And I'm going to kick a version of this question over to Candy and Adam afterwards. So my question for Tim or Dan, how would you define success for participants of this class, juxtaposed with how you define success for the cadre? So how do you define the student success and then the success of your instructors teaching it?
Okay. So first, I want to readdress something. This is not an instructor development course. All right. So what most people think is I got to come out of this with a 90% or above. Now, I would say that is a very, very good goal to have, but it's probably not as realistic for someone who has never taken this class before, and who hasn't been teaching for a really, really long time. That's a tough number to get. That's a really, really tough number to get. So it's not, I wouldn't say that their measurement for success should be your typical pass or fail 90% or above score. Your measurement for success is how well did you take criticism? How much information were you able to take away and become a better trainer? That is your true measurement for success. This class is not meant to be a one and done. The course is not designed that way. The course is designed to be revisited. And let's see if I can't show my improvement later on. Come back and take it again, because you're not graded the same way that you're being graded at any of these other courses. None of these other courses include subjective feedback in their hard grading system. They don't include it. And 50% of the students' grade in this course is based on peer review and how well they're able to deliver content, that type of thing. So as far as success for our instructors, that is determined by the success of the students, how well they receive the information, and how well we ran the course. Now we're still trying to figure out a way to maintain a Raven in the class. So Raven was this guy who sat all creepy in the shadows of the class, and he followed us around everywhere. And his job was to just simply watch us and critique us and wait for us to get eaten alive so he could, finish us off. That was his job. So at the end of all of this, we had to sit down and get a brief from the Raven about all of the things that he thought that we did right and all the things that we did wrong. So as far as, our training partners here, like Adam and Candy and Chris and John and all these others who took the class, they were being graded by their peers. So were we. So we were being graded. And I mean, our goal with this is try to, to try and connect with them as much as we possibly can and help them understand that, look, I'm not here to boss you around. That's not at all. I think our intent, and one of the best ways I've heard it described is we're just simply here to hold up a mirror, and that's it. Hold up a mirror and show you where you're at. And if you don't like what you see, change it. Simple as that. If you don't know how, you just networked with 13 other people, 15, 16 other people in this class that can help guide you and who want to see you succeed. So, I mean, the ball's in your court as far as like what you would consider a success. Because if you come out there thinking that, oh crap, I only got a C in this class, man, there's no other grading system like it in our community.
I love it. Dan, what would you add to that?
Just jumping off the last point that Tim made about this course being a mirror. It's not just a mirror. It's, do you know who you are as an instructor? Do you know who you are as a shooter? If I ask anyone in my department, all right, anyone in my department, hey, if I asked you to draw from a concealed holster from 5 yards and fire 5 rounds into a playing card in under 5 seconds, do you think you could do that? I would get 50 or 60% of them would say yes. And I bet you my next paycheck, less than 5% actually could. And what that means, it's not a value judgment of them as individuals or as shooters. But what it means is they have no idea who they are as a shooter. They overestimate their own ability, right? Whereas if I asked Adam that question, even before this course, Adam would be like, yeah, if I'm on, I'll probably put it down at about 3.8. If I snag my draw, I'll end up with a 4.15. And because I know Adam, I know that estimation would be spot on. He would miss that estimation by less than 2% because I know who he is. And he knows who he is as a shooter. If you don't know who you are, how do you know where you want to get to? Because you don't know your map for improvement. You don't have a guidepost because you don't even know where you're at. This course, your measurement for success at an absolute minimum should be, I know who I am. I know where I am, and I know how to get where I want to be.
That's very well said. Side note, my transitions in between questions is terrible, guys. So I'm gonna, in the comments, let me know what I need to be saying in between after these great answers so I don't make it as choppy as it had been. But Adam, I want to know what your kind of going into this class, what was your threshold or your bar for, after this class, if I do X, Y, or Z, or if I get X, Y, or Z, it will be successful. Kind of what's your measure for success after taking this class?
Well, I didn't know if it was a pass-fail class. I didn't know anything, right? I just wanted to go in and kind of do my best at it. And really, for me, I know there's got to be all sorts of holes in what I do and what I teach, right? I think I do a decent job, but surely there's a lot of areas that improvement can be done. And oftentimes we just don't know what we don't know. And I wanted to find out, what do I not know? What do I need to know that needs to be done, right? I have people to train, right? That possibly are going to have to fight for their lives. So therefore, how do I find out more that I can pass on to them? And that was my goal with this, is what little nuggets can I get? What big nuggets can I get? If it's a pass fail, I'd like to pass the thing. Ultimately, it wasn't really a pass fail. It was really just, as Tim said, an enrichment. As Candy said earlier, and I thought so well, it's a why course. It's a why course, right? Not only just the teaching side, but the why behind the how. And to me, it was really just dig deep into all of that and find out what is I can improve in and change and maybe completely understand anew differently than I currently did. And that was my goal. I didn't even know what I was going to get to. I mean, they literally called me, said, "Hey, you're coming." And then I had all sorts of computer problems. I didn't get all their emails. Next thing you know, I just showed up. So to me, I didn't know what I was getting into, and I was just looking to pull as much as I could out of it. It was a bit more than I thought it was going to be. You go into everything thinking it's just going to be some dumb NRA course. Sorry, NRA, just how it is. Or USCCA course. And well, it was a bit different. I would tell you that after going through this, there's 4 or 5, maybe 6 instructor programs in the country that I think are just absolutely mandatory for anybody who's truly serious about this, right? For my team here at Defenders, this is going to be one of those that's absolutely mandatory. It needs to be part of the quiver of your bow and arrow. It needs to be one of your in your quiver of things you need to go do. Find you, figure out what you're doing, get critique from others, get critique from people who are professional, find ways to improve what you do, because we got to communicate truly important stuff to people. So to me, the evaluation of success was get something little to something big. And for those who are high-end shooters, you know how it is. You go to a course, and oftentimes you walk away going, "I didn't learn a thing," or "I got 1 or 2 things from it." And really, to me, if I walked away getting 1 or 2 things, I thought that was good. And I think I got more in the non-shooting stuff, though. Dan's shooting thing is pretty cool. I wish so bad I could tell you about it, but I can't. Dan said he'd boot stomp me and kill me, so I'm not gonna. But I'll tell you, I got more in the non-shooting than in the shooting, because I already can shoot okay, at least on Thursdays. And so I enjoyed the shooting stuff, got some really cool stuff out of it. But the non-shooting I thought was more important. Certainly the peer stuff I thought was excellent.
Man, I love the non-shooting stuff in classes. And the idea of a peer review, that kind of, that really piques my interest, because that's not something that you get anywhere else. I've taken a higher end, kind of one of the highly sought after instructor development courses. And there wasn't a lot of time for that. And there's not a lot of time for it, because how do you do that in 2 days if you have, 20 students in class or 25 students in class? There's just really there's no time for that.
Yes, there is. We figured it out.
You figured it out. But I've been, I've traveled hours. Tim and I took a day trip, and we traveled, and so I really like that you guys have figured that piece out and to put it in there, Dan and Tim. And that's because it's something that TC talks about right now, or he just mentioned. He said another hole that this class fills: as instructors, we teach, but how often do we really get to take a class in which our teaching ability is demonstrated and examined by people who are qualified to do so, right? We just don't have the time or often access to a dozen people dedicated to helping us improve over the course of a couple of days. And how true is that, right? Like in my town, it's Andy and I, and there are a couple other reputable instructors, but when do we get together and really, I guess, challenge test each other and I guess put how we teach in front of those who also teach, and then are open to receiving that feedback. So I want to give Candy a second to introduce or to speak on that a little bit, unless you guys wanted to kind of expand or expound upon what I just rattled off at you.
May I for a second?
Absolutely.
it's not just the peers honking off at you at the end of it, right? Tim does this thing, Dan does this thing, a couple other guys tell you what you could have improved on, or things they thought that you could do. But all the students get to stand around and kind of tell you what you're doing. But it's not that just that they're honking off at each other at it. There's also a grading system that's done anonymously. And I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say this, so Tim, stop me if you need me to. But there's a rather simplistic but oddly bipolarly detailed way to score this on an anonymous basis on paper and dump that off to them for later review. And that's both good and bad, in the sense that there's going to be people there that either a whole lot more experienced than you or a whole lot less. And therefore the scoring they can do can be really way too harsh, as I suspected it was a couple times, and sometimes not harsh enough. But I think the balance comes out of that to where ultimately it tells the true story of it. So it's not just them standing in a crowd talking to you and afraid to say something or being too harsh on something. They can actually put their private thoughts on paper without fear of what the crowd says, right? Or what others might think because they said something out loud. Or maybe they're the person that's just afraid to speak, or they speak too much. They're actually able to put it on paper, and that gives a true balance to the verbal peer review afterwards. It also gives a scoring to it that's, I would tell you, more honest to who they are. So I thought that was something, again, another one of the, I don't know, about 5 or 6 things I'm flat out stealing from this course, because I thought, as I build my instructor course, I thought that was brilliant. I don't know where these people came up with it, but it was awesome. And I want to steal that because I think that was just phenomenal.
Nice. Candy, I want you to talk to us a little bit about your kind of bar for success and some of those nuggets that you took away from this course.
Honestly, this was the first time I had been involved in something of this scale and this magnitude, and I truly felt like a kid in a candy store, because I think I was probably one of the newer instructors there. So all of this was brand new to me. It really was. And while it was incredibly enjoyable, initially it was incredibly intimidating as well. And the thing that kind of broke the ice for me was when I saw the Apache cadre present to us not just a do as I say attitude, but a do as we do attitude, because they towed the line in everything. If lunch was 30 minutes, it was 30 minutes. If you needed to be on the line at a certain time, you needed to be on the line at a certain time. They weren't obnoxious. They weren't overbearing, but at the same time, they silently or in their own way impressed upon us the importance of, if you're the instructor, then you are in charge, and you need to be in charge, and you need to run your class, you need to run that line, and you are responsible for your students. They made that crystal clear, even though we were all instructors. To them, we were still their students, and they were 100% responsible for us. Because they treated us that way, that's what I left with. I left with a whole new sense of responsibility of the title instructor. Instructor is not just throw the PowerPoint up there, read it off, have them shoot a paper plate, and call it a day. That is not instructing. That's not training. That's not changing lives. That's not expanding minds. I want to be instructors like Apache's instructors are. That's where my bar is. I want Tim Kelly looking at me and saying, you know what, Candy? I got a spot, and that spot's for you. If I ever get that, then I've reached my bar.
Speaking off of that, Tim and Dan, how did you get together this first group of instructor students? What were some of the characteristics and traits that you were looking for to have in this class? Because it obviously wasn't, I can't remember if it was Dan or I think it was Dan, and he was talking about, the reputation and kind of the clout that some of these students and instructors had. So it obviously wasn't like, hey, let's just get some low bar instructors in here to pat ourselves on the back. So what were some of the things you guys were looking for in this first group of students?
So first off, I had to contain Dan. I had to contain him and his excitement because he has this laundry list of friends and folks that he was like, man, these guys have got to see this. They've got to see this. I got to get them in. But I'm sorry, Dan, what were you going to say?
So I had this idea, and this idea was, I don't want anybody who's going to hold back as a student in this class, because I want this class to be the worst one we ever teach. I want this to be the rough draft. I want guys and girls in this class who will red ink this class, who will red ink me and my presentation, and who will say, hey, this was great. This really, really needs some bolstering. This you should probably do away with entirely. I wanted people that I knew had the integrity and the temerity to look me in the eye and say, I'll get you back in a couple of weeks. You'll have an actual AAR that is actionable. I'll give you my genuine thoughts. And I know Candy. I went through a range master class with Candy, and I know Adam. We taught at Girl and a Gun at the same time, and we shared some meals together. And we have some other close friends that we have this ethos with, the gun set crew in Ohio specifically, Scott Cronin, John Willis, and those guys they're never going to sugarcoat anything, and so we wanted those guys there. And I have a pretty tight working relationship with Chris Bean. I know he's not going to sugarcoat anything. So I wanted a diverse perspective. I wanted fairly new instructors who hadn't been doing it for a very long time. I wanted people from the law enforcement community. I knew Adam had been a cop about as long as I have, and is coming at it from a certain angle. I wanted people of great individualized skill, and I wanted people who are maybe still in the newer portions of their own skill development, because I very, very much wanted this full spectrum of feedback from a wide variety of perspectives. And I think one of the strengths in us selecting the class, the class training partners that we got, is we got almost 50% women in that class.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever seen another firearms class ever anywhere aside from a Girl and a Gun conference that had 50% women. It's unheard of. It just doesn't happen. That was something that I wanted, because the female perspective, especially in the firearms and defensive training community, is not often addressed. And I wanted that kind of feedback from Candy, from Joy, from Alexis, from the rest of these students in the class, who Adam's a great guy, but he's still a guy, and he can't give me female perspective on it. He just can't. So that was a big goal for me, is to have that very global look at the material that we had put together. And yes, Tim had to, whoa, dude, really pull back on the reins hard a number of times.
So we really, we did handpick, a few students. One of the first things that we did was we wanted opportunity for our cadre to see the Instructor Enrichment Program in its entirety, the way it was planned to be done in the first place, and not just, hey, this is the meat and potatoes. We wanted them to have an opportunity, but we also didn't want to fill up the entire class. So we opened up four seats just to our cadre alone. And so once we had that handled, we let a few folks know, and it wasn't one of those things that was just like, hey, let's see if we can't, pick and tailor this class like specifically and just handpick every single person. It wasn't like that. We opened it up to the range master community. The reason why we opened up to the range master community is because we wanted some type of solid baseline that we could draw from. And the range master community has some really, really awesome instructors, the guys and girls who've been teaching for a very long time. And they have folks that have just gotten into it. And Range Master, their 3-day instructor development course is one of their first ones. And, so we wanted that type of baseline, and without just going out and opening it up to the public and letting every, Joe Schmo have an opportunity to sign up for this. We kind of really wanted to know where they come from first. Just to be able to manage this a little bit better. And we ended up, actually, we were 50-50. But one of the ladies in our cadre actually had to sit it out because she had an emergency surgery she had to deal with. And that's just kind of how it all played out.
Yeah, the Range Master group of instructors is it is a great group of folks, and the more on social media, right, the more comments that you kick around, it seems that there are fewer of those just kind of antiquated comments and just like the old wives' tales that get spouted off in the gun community. If you click on their profile, they're typically not a range master instructor. So the good work that Tom is doing over there is awesome, and it's great to see those folks kind of continue up with their personal development in firearms instruction. And it's been a lifelong commitment to him, and God bless Tom for doing that, because we all know the industry needed it. And that he feels a massive void there. I wanted to kick it back over to Candy, and I think I want to dig into that female perspective a little bit more. Candy, what have you found, I guess, through the other courses that you've attended with regards to like the female perspective? And is it addressed? Is it just kind of this thing that we don't even acknowledge in the firearms industry? What are your thoughts on that in general?
I don't want to say that it's ignored, and I don't want to say that it's not addressed. I think sometimes it's addressed too much and in the wrong way. I think that sometimes we women are not expected to meet the same bar as men. And not always, of course, but I have seen it where things got dumbed down, watered down, for want of better terminology, because we were a woman. Well, I don't like that. I'll be honest. Typically, when I come to a class like Apache or one of Tom Given's, I know that I will not walk away with one of their coins or something like that, because I'm simply not fast enough. I'm just not. And typically that's what I see with a lot of female shooters. We lack speed. We don't lack accuracy. We can tend to be spot on, but typically we're not as fast as guys. And I like it that when we went through this course in particular, we were all on the same playing field. And I like that. I like that we didn't feel like things were being dumbed down or watered down for us. We were held to the same standards as our male counterparts. I hope that's making sense because it's kind of hard to explain, especially for you guys because you probably don't see it. Or if you do see it, you probably don't know it when you see it. But we female shooters, we do. We know it, we feel it, we see it, and sometimes it hurts because it comes across as you'll never be as fast as a guy, you'll never be as big as strong as whatever as a guy, so just be happy where you are. In this particular course, that never happened. It was like, you know what, you can be as fast as you can be and we'll help you get there. I hope that makes sense.
No, it absolutely does. It absolutely does. And I appreciate you sharing that insight. I want to stay with you here for a minute. What was the biggest challenge or obstacle for you in this course?
Speed. I am not a fast shooter, and that is my Achilles heel. And I'm working on it. And believe it or not, during this class, I don't know if Tim and Dan noticed it, but during this class, I was texting stuff to an instructor friend of mine, and I just kept sending him stuff like 10, 10, 10, and da 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 da, and I would just be sending him this randy stuff or this random stuff. And then after I got out of the class, I called him and I said, the reason I was texting you that stuff is this is all things that I want to work on when I get back home. And he was like, oh, I get it. And I didn't want to write it down or anything like that. I wanted to text it really quick so I could get back into the class, but I didn't want to lose those important little nuggets that I'm like, okay, this bar is not where I want it to be. I got to work on this. This isn't where I want it to be. I got to work on this. And I'm very blessed to have someone here whose abilities are off the charts, who will take time to work with me to help me grow.
Next time you're struggling with speed, just remind your instructor that slow is smooth and smooth is fast, and that should dismiss any.
Stop it.
Yeah, right. Because no. I already know
that's the show,
slow
folks.
is slow. I have been told repeatedly, slow is slow. That's all it is.
Yeah, slow is slow, man. I was reading through some comments in a I was reading through some comments in the deliberate training group, and I think Dan, you were part of that deal where this dude was like, what did he say? He said something to the effect of, in a gunfight, it's calm and precision that prevail, or something to that effect. And I'm like, dude, they're not mutually exclusive. You could be fast, you could be accurate, you could be calm, you could be all that stuff. That's funny. So Adam, talk to us a little bit about the challenges, if any, that you had in this class, or some of those aha moments that you might have had.
All right, back to Dan's drill, your favorite topic. That we're not allowed to talk about, right? Sworn to secrecy, going to kill you. Dan will kill you if we do talk about it. So not going to talk about it, but it was so well done. It's something that I've been trying to do for a couple of years. I just hadn't thought of the way you'd done it. And afterwards, I thought of a way to do it slightly better. So, Dan, there you go. But I'll tell you what, it was awesome. That was truly an aha moment. Another aha moment was, again, the anonymous student or peer feedback. I thought that was just genius. I ran an instructor level course for a bunch of SWAT cops a couple months ago. And I just sat there and thought, why didn't I think of this? Why didn't I think of that, right? We all talked to each other and gave feedback, but why not give anonymous feedback? Because, right, in that case, we had a sergeant in there and a couple of his SWAT buddies. They were kind of afraid of him. And, you know, I should have had something like that. That was brilliant, right? Another thing was just the Tim kind of kept us on almost like a freaking drill sergeant, you know, a drill instructor, chop thing. Now, I like doing that in my courses. I keep people moving. I just got done teaching 2 full days. I had a bunch of SWAT cops and some other people, and I kept them moving. But I've never been to an instructor course except for mine that I did with some people where you kept people moving. Tim kept you on a chop schedule, right? It was like being back in drill sergeant school. And I thought that was pretty good. It was done well to where you didn't offend Mr. Joe Jane civilian or make some grumpy old vet mad about it, right? It was just done well, and it was truly chop. I thought that was really well done. Not so much an aha moment, but you know what? Hey, I do that to some extent, but I like how it's so well organized, literally down to the minute. I thought that was pretty good. Those were probably the biggest things. I liked how the presentations, you had a dude the first day did a lot of stuff named Frank. And then I think second day, Dan, that was you, or maybe it was the first day, I don't remember. But they both came in, they kind of gave segments in the classroom portions that at first seem elementary, seem basic, until you got into it a little bit, you started hearing kind of the nuance behind it. I thought that was really well done. And it was clearly so well thought through and put together in a well communicative way that that I just thought it was well done. And it I tend to present, I think, in my classes decently well, but I thought that was so well organized that, you know, I want to start mimicking or emulating that myself. I liked how it was so well thought through, and it was clearly not just something that they debated right there amongst themselves at night. They really roundtabled it and took the ideas. At least that's what I took of it, is Dan or Frank or Tim roundtabled it and took all the less efficient stuff out of it and made it a little bit more efficient. I just liked how that was done. I thought, okay, I need to go back and refine on my presentations. I need to refine those a little bit more too, just kind of seeing on that. Beyond that, I liked what they did, but those are kind of my big aha moments.
Before we wrap up, I guess one of the last questions I want to ask is, Tim and Dan, is there anything after looking back at this class that you wish you would have known prior to the class, or you're like, oh man, if we would have thought about this, if we would have seen this? And that might be difficult because I know TC, he was talking about how much he wanted to point out how much research and effort you all put into kind of front loading this course, and that how it was all, it wasn't just randomly thrown together around a table with some beers, but you guys actually put a ton of effort and research into what you guys were teaching. So if that question doesn't apply, we can just skip over it.
If anything, it was about trimming stuff off rather than adding more stuff in. For just for my portion, I put about a 90-minute presentation, classroom presentation in there, and then afternoon portion of shooting. I put about 400 hours of development into that. It's a lot. It's a lot. I think I read something like 2,800 pages on adult learning theory, which is not the most engaging subject matter out there. Trimming off the not truly critical stuff. Adam's touched on it a few times. The responsibility that we bear teaching people this literally deadly subject matter is not a weight that I can overstate. And while I don't take myself seriously at all, I take my responsibilities incredibly seriously. And I don't think there's something I wish I knew before the class that I could put in. Maybe just be a touch more efficient with my presentation so that Chris Bean wasn't sitting there going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God.
Just remind Chris, slow is smooth. What about you, Tim? Was there anything that you know, in hindsight, you were like, oh man, we could have done this or should have trimmed
Just
this?
quickly realized that I had my notes down here, so I pulled them out really fast. As far as what we would have changed, or man, like any, like, what do we call them, saved rounds, and any type of man, I wish we would have thought of that for this. I'd say the only thing I really wished we could have made happen that didn't happen in this one was to make sure the patches were there. The patches were not there because our patch guy fell through, and that sucked. Other than that, I'm really grateful for the team, because without this is a very, very logistically heavy course. There's so many moving parts. And I think John said it in the chat. He said it's very high tempo. And no, John, I know he wants his patch. It's very high tempo. And that's because it's because it's literally in 15-minute and 30-minute increments. That's how this course is laid out. And it's important that we stay on task. And there were some things that we discovered throughout the class that were like, this right here, what's happening, what's unfolding organically right now, is carrying more weight than what we have planned in the next 15 minutes. So we can scrub that. So we made a lot of, I don't say a lot of audibles, but there were a few really very useful audibles, and those weren't ever my shots. I'm not the head like shot caller here, right? That's one of those like, Dan, you seeing this? Frank, you seeing this? What do you think about this? Or they saying the same thing to me, and we're bouncing ideas off of each other, and it works really, really well when you have an effective team, when you have guys that you trust, and folks that you work with and that are of the same mindset, and they've been sitting at those round tables at every single meeting, putting in the effort, such as the hours upon research that Dan has put into this, and the hours upon hours of time that Frank's put into designing the grading, the digitizing the grading. That I still don't understand that witchcraft, but he was able to accomplish that. There's just so much that went into this, and I think the only thing that I would say that was really left out was the patches, and I think anything else we had the ability to call an audible, and it worked great. Now that's not to disregard any of the feedback that we've gotten or the feedback that we got from Raven or anything like that. I'm just saying, all in all, I don't think there was anything that stands out that, man, I really wish that would have happened.
Daniel asks, he said he's joining late. When are y'all running the next one? And then after that, I'm going to follow up with our students.
Don't make me be the bad guy.
Daniel, I will let you know soon.
All right. I'm going to say this. February is going to be when we announce the next class. Somewhere a little before February, maybe a little after February. That's when we plan to announce the next one. So that's about all I can give you right now. And I'll tell you this, it's going to be held at Apache. As I said before, this is a very logistically heavy course, and it's not something that we're really willing to take on the road just yet, because we're afraid that it might sacrifice some of the course content that we want to give out.
That makes sense. Before we wrap up and finish up, Adam and Candy, I want to get your thoughts on what would you tell Daniel he needs to do, and we'll start with Candy. What would you tell, or what's some advice you have for Daniel if he's taking this next class?
My advice to Daniel would be to come with a completely open mind. Come prepared to work hard, come prepared to learn. Definitely take it seriously because it is painfully obvious that these men have poured their heart and souls into this program. It shows, it's awesome. And if you come and just be open to learn, be open to try new things, be open to different perspectives, be open to realizing that what you've been doing all this time can be optimized. It's not like it was a waste of time or anything like that, but come prepared to learn ways to, if you're already rocking it, come prepared to learn ways to rock it even harder. It's an outstanding experience, and don't come expecting anything except to learn and to grow.
It was obvious that to me that they put their heart and soul into it, because when I asked that question, I saw this moment of like, never again. We're never running this course again, because it took so much of me. And then immediately after that, it was like this glimmer of excitement, like, oh, we get to do it again. Right. And that's, so I felt that when I asked that question to Tim and Dan, and it was kind of cool to see. So Adam, what advice do you have for Daniel?
So Daniel, read the emails, or at least bug these guys to make sure you get the emails. I didn't realize you had to submit certain things, or at least I didn't realize the depth of which it was. So make sure you do that. Two, because I didn't realize some of the stuff that was when I went into this, I kind of went into just thought I'd mouth breathe my way through it, shoot my little bit and leave, right? Get my piece of paper. It takes a little bit more than that. You got to actually put some time and effort into it. I would work on some of your shooting skills, but also be really, really well prepared to help diagnose your fellow student or students that you get paired up with, right? I think that's part of the importance of this, is you being able to show that you are a good diagnostician of what they're doing mechanically. And as Candy said, not just what they're doing, but the why of what they're doing. So if you're not already a good diagnostician, what the target tells you of what you're seeing in your fellow student or students' bodies, whatever else, if you can take the time to learn how to do that, you can help them not only become a better shooter while they're doing this, better thinker of what they're doing, but also a better instructor for their later students they're going to impact. So I would tell you, come into this prepared already as much as a diagnostician of shooting as you possibly can.
Jeremy, real quick, one other thing that that I would tell them to be prepared with: 15 minutes means 15 minutes, and that's all you have. Do not send Tim an email saying, if it's 21 minutes, is that okay? Because he's going to write you a very sweet email back that says, nope, 21 minutes ain't cutting it. You got 15.
Love that. Okay. You're not telling me that us dudes in the front of the class like to hear ourselves talk, are you?
They don't want to hear us drone on. It's like, nope, here's your time frame. You got 15 minutes.
Nice. So I had a lazy intro, lazy outro, just to keep things on par for the course. Around the horn, is there anything that we should have talked about with regards to this course that we haven't touched on yet? And Tim, I'll start off with you.
What Candy's referring to is, and Adam actually, is the video entry. So after you register for the class, you're given your first assignment immediately. That assignment is prior to 2 weeks before the class starts. You have to submit a video of you giving an introduction and a range safety brief. And you have to do that in 15 minutes. And I understand that it is a time crunch, but we have our reasons behind that. And so that's one of the things I think we left out, was the whole video thing. That is a graded, that's a part of your grade. Now it's a small part of your grade, but it's still a part of your grade. We do that for a couple of different reasons. One of the primary reasons why we wanted to do that is to be able to keep a log for our training partners, for the folks that are signing up for this class. We want to be able to keep a log of their ability to effectively deliver a range safety brief. And if they were not able, if they left something out, or if they, it was inadequate or whatever, we have something that we give them afterwards that say, hey, this is what we've seen that we think you need to add. This is what we think you need to take away, something along those lines. But we have a discussion about it. The other thing, no, I think that's about all we really need to cover.
Can I add one thing?
Yeah.
I think it's the Days Inn. Don't stay at the Days Inn. Okay.
Don't
Seriously.
stay at Days Inn in Yankinville. That's a part of the email too, Adam. Stay in Jonesville, 20 minutes away, or grab yourself an Airbnb. Don't stay at the hotel in Yankinville.
Awesome. What about you, Dan? Anything that we should have touched on that we haven't?
We kind of alluded to it in a certain way, but I like the way that Tim has said it out loud to me a number of times. One of the focuses of this class is to try to get our training partners to understand that there's a bunch of stuff you do as an instructor that you do simply because you're trying to emulate somebody else, not because you've ever been taught that it's actually effective. Now, a lot of times emulation, what is it? Imitation is the most sincere form of flattery, right? But a lot of times emulation is inefficient. It is less than optimal. And if you look at the core, or the pillars, or the foundation of whatever the individual subject matter is that you're trying to relate to a student or student body, you can efficiently address that by actually learning how to do it, not just being like, I like the way Tim Kelly says this, so I'm going to say it like Tim Kelly. It's a key component of this class, is understanding the foundations of why we do something, not just emulating it because, well, Dan Brady's tall and I want to be like him.
So it won't make me grow a few inches taller?
I mean, Adam's still short. Tim Herron's still short. Like, I just
those valid points. Nice. Well, I know you guys are a few hours ahead of us, and you got to be up in a few hours. So I really do appreciate y'all jumping on with us and sharing your evening to provide some insight into this course. And I'm positive that our viewers have found it extremely valuable. Our comment section, we're blowing up mostly with each other, kind of, some friendly banter between Chris and John and the Apache and Defenders guys. But it really does mean a lot to me that you guys shared your evening with us. I greatly appreciate that. I can't thank you guys enough. And I just want to say thank you. So there, I said thank you. See, Andy, I told you I needed you on the show because everything that I've said today was kind of, it was okay. But remember, it's your life. Let's see. Hold on, Jonathan. Chris, cargo shorts. He wants to know, can he wear cargo shorts in his video intro?
Sure. Why not?
Or TC's suit approach.
Yeah, that was his video.
He was in a suit?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
yes,
TC.
A hand-built, custom-made suit.
Yes.
That is awesome. All right, cool. So somebody has to up the suit. Maybe it's a suit of armor in the next video for the next round of classes. But remember, it's your life, it's your safety and protection, it's your responsibility. We'll see y'all next week. Stay safe.